On a freezing December night in 1986, a 20-year-old college student vanished on her way home on a busy California interstate. Her body later found discarded in a dry riverbed below an isolated off-ramp. The official police narrative was quick and predictable. A tragic crime of opportunity, likely a transient or a drifter lurking in the darkness. But the monster who killed Cara Knott wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was hiding behind a badge, a siren, and the full, unyielding protection of the California Highway Patrol. We now have undeniable proof that dozens of young women warned the department about a predator operating in their ranks months before Cara died, and the brass deliberately buried those complaints to protect their star officer. Today, we are dismantling the murder of Cara Knott. We will examine the bizarre physical evidence left at the scene, the terrifying abuse of authority that enabled a killer, and the deeply corrupt brotherhood that almost let him get away with it. The night of the 27th of December 1986 was meant to be ordinary. 20-year-old Cara Knott, a bright, deeply loved student at San Diego State University, was driving her white Volkswagen Beetle south on Interstate 15. She had just left her boyfriend's house in Escondido and was heading home to her family. It was a route she had driven 100 times before, but Cara never made it home. By the early hours of the morning, panic had set in. Her family, knowing Cara was fiercely responsible and would never just disappear, began frantically searching the highway. What they found on the desolate, poorly lit Mercy Road off-ramp would alter the course of their lives forever. Cara's Volkswagen was parked on the shoulder. The engine was still warm, the keys were in the ignition, and, chillingly, the driver's side window was rolled down. This was a freezing winter night. There was absolutely no reason for a young woman driving alone to pull over in the pitch black and roll down her window, unless she was instructed to do so by someone she believed she had to obey. Someone with authority. 65 feet below the bridge, in the brush of a dry ravine, police found Cara's body. She had been brutally beaten and strangled to death with a rope before being callously thrown over the edge. When investigators processed the scene, they found several bizarre anomalies that didn't fit the profile of a random drifter attack. First, there was the rope used to strangle her. It wasn't just knotted. It was tied with a highly specific, professional-grade knot. Second, the autopsy revealed defensive wounds, but more importantly, it yielded a microscopic piece of evidence that would become the linchpin of the case. A single synthetic gold thread, no longer than a few millimeters, found clinging to Cara's clothing. At the same time, the San Diego police began their standard procedures. They looked at the boyfriend. They looked at local criminals. But the timeline was incredibly tight, and the precision of the crime felt too organized. Just days after the murder, a local television station decided to run a segment on the dangers of women driving alone at night, specifically referencing the Mercy Road tragedy. To get the perspective of law enforcement, a reporter rode along with a highly decorated California Highway Patrol officer. His name was Craig Peyer. Peyer was the golden boy of the CHP. He had been with the force for 13 years, featured in promotional materials, and was considered an exemplary officer. On camera, bathed in the glow of the dashboard lights, Peyer looked directly into the lens and offered advice to female drivers. He spoke about the tragedy of the Knott case with a chilling, detached calm. But viewers, and later investigators, noticed something deeply unsettling about Officer Peyer during this broadcast. Deep, angry scratch marks scored his face. When asked about them, Peyer smoothly claimed he had slipped and fallen face-first into a chain-link fence while writing a ticket for a motorist earlier that week. It was a plausible excuse. He was a respected officer, but the San Diego Police Department homicide detectives who operated separately from the Highway Patrol were beginning to notice the cracks in Peyer's perfect facade. And this is where the story shifts from a tragic murder mystery into a horrifying exposure of institutional rot. Because the system didn't just fail Cara Knott. The system actively handed her killer the weapon. If you look at the internal records of the California Highway Patrol in the months leading up to December 1986, a terrifying pattern emerges. Dozens of young, attractive women had called the department to file formal complaints against an officer operating on Interstate 15. The complaints were nearly identical. The women reported being pulled over by a CHP cruiser late at night for minor, almost non-existent traffic infractions. But instead of conducting the stop on the well-lit shoulder of the highway, the officer would use his PA system to order the women down the dark, isolated Mercy Road off-ramp. Once there, The officer wouldn't write a ticket. Instead, he would lean into their windows. He would keep them trapped in their cars for over an hour. He would ask deeply intimate, inappropriate questions about their personal lives. Several women reported that he would reach into the car and stroke their hair. The officer was Craig Peyer. The profound frustration here is that these women did exactly what you are supposed to do. They survived a predator, and they reported him to the authorities. They raised the alarm. And what did the California Highway Patrol management do with these complaints? They ignored them. They actively buried them. Peyer was a veteran, a top-ticket writer, and a media darling for the department. In the toxic, insular culture of law enforcement at the time, the brass viewed these complaints as a nuisance, an occupational hazard of a proactive cop. Instead of pulling his badge, initiating a formal internal affairs investigation, or taking him off the street, his supervisors quietly pulled him aside for off-the-record chats. They told him to tone it down. They protected the uniform, and in doing so, they signed Cara Knott's death warrant. Imagine the sheer terror of Cara's final moments. You are driving home. You see the flashing red and blue lights in your rearview mirror. You are conditioned from birth to pull over, to comply, to trust the person walking up to your window. You roll down the glass because the law dictates you must. Cara didn't pull over for a killer. She pulled over for the state of California, and the state of California betrayed her. As the San Diego police zeroed in on Peyer, the friction between the two agencies exploded. The CHP initially closed ranks, a classic blue wall of silence, but the physical evidence was becoming insurmountable. Remember the single gold thread found on Cara's body? Forensics matched it perfectly to the yellow gold threading used to stitch the California Highway Patrol patches onto their uniforms. The rope used to strangle her? It was the exact type of rope Peyer kept in the trunk of his cruiser, tied with the exact same specialized knot taught in police training. Furthermore, a bloody footprint found near the crime scene matched the precise size and sole pattern of the standard-issue boots Peyer was wearing that night. And perhaps the most damning piece of physical evidence: a single drop of Cara's blood was found on one of Peyer's boots. Despite this mountain of evidence, the system fought back. When Craig Peyer finally went to trial, the defense leaned heavily into the psychological conditioning of the public. They argued that a decorated police officer simply could not have committed such a heinous act. The strategy almost worked. The first trial resulted in a hung jury. 7 jurors voted for conviction, but 5 simply could not bring themselves to believe that a man in a police uniform was capable of being a monster. It is a terrifying testament to how deeply ingrained our deference to authority truly is. It wasn't until the second trial, when the prosecution relentlessly hammered home the testimony of the 22 other women who had been terrorized by Peyer on that exact same off-ramp, that the jury finally understood the truth. Craig Peyer wasn't a cop who made a mistake. He was a serial predator who used a taxpayer-funded badge and a gun as his hunting tools. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. But a conviction does not erase the systemic failure that allowed it to happen. The California Highway Patrol had the data. They had the warnings. They knew they had a rogue officer using his authority to trap young women in the dark. By choosing to protect their own reputation over the safety of the public, they became complicit in the death of a 20-year-old girl who had her whole life ahead of her. The badge didn't just shield Craig Peyer from suspicion. It provided him with the victims. If you thought the police in this town were corrupt, wait until you hear how a billionaire bought his way out of a double homicide. Click the video on your screen to see the case they tried to bury.